equal match for Razgatlioglu for pace in that race, but by the time Toprak had weaved his way through into second, was already a couple of seconds behind. So he was unable to bridge that gap from there. And I suppose that's the source of frustration for Toprak. He would have felt that he could have got that race victory, then he would have been able to afford a second place in race one here in Jerez in order to be confirmed world champion.
And I think that was one of the big things. Obviously, the pressure builds. There's a world championship to win. And these riders have spent so much of their careers building up towards this moment. For Bulaga, building up towards potentially winning his first Superbike World Championship. He looks like he's the rider to beat here in the championship next year when Toprak leaves. But there's still a title to be decided this weekend. Razgatlioglu's into his final weekend as a Superbike rider. He knows next year is not going to be a case of going out and winning multiple races in a weekend or being able to always be at the front like he has this season. He knows it's going to be a tougher time, so he knows that it becomes pressure-filled to make the most of these kind of moments, and I think it's just key to see how everyone's dealing with that pressure.
39 points, the gap between the top two in the championship. 37 points available on day two here in Jerez. So if Toprak can keep his margin at 37 points or more, i.e. concede 2 points or fewer to Nicolo Bulaga, then he will be crowned world champion in race one tomorrow afternoon. Of course, the easiest way for him to do that is to go away and win race one. That's far from a guarantee, though. He's had to put up with 3 second places in the last 2 rounds.
Yeah, and obviously for Razgatlioglu, that 13 wins in a row mid-season stretch, that's been the foundation of his championship. But we've seen it over the last few rounds. It has been tougher. Jerez is a track that suits both bikes, and it was interesting in yesterday's press conference between Bulaga and Toprak. They were both asked, what's the one thing that you'd like from your rival's bike or performance here at Jerez? And Bulaga said, breaking into turn one, breaking into turn six. That's where Toprak's obviously very strong. Toprak was talking about the final sector, because that run in towards turn 13 with all those fast corners, it just builds the speed, and it's where the Ducati's really strong to set something up into the final corner. So Toprak knows he's going to be under pressure this weekend. For Bulaga, it's a case of trying to put yourself into a position to be able to keep that pressure on and just try and make the championship battle go to Sunday, but easier said than done.
Also reminds us of last season, of course, here in Jerez, where those final 2 rounds, Estoril, Jerez back-to-back, that's where Nicolo Bulaga showed the first signs of being able to make the step forward that he's gone on to make over the course of this season.
Yeah, and Bulaga is a super impressive rider. We've seen it this year. Once again, he's been able to make that next step in his career. And when you look at what he's been able to achieve this season, he is the only guy that's been able to go with Toprak. He's the only guy that's brought the fight to Razgatlioglu and been able to attack him. And one of the big reasons for that is every chance he gets to overtake Toprak, he comes through. It may not always be a move that sticks, and it may not be in a place where you're really able to make an overtaking move to stay in the lead, but he does to Toprak what Toprak does to everyone else, and that's just put the bike down the inside, make the other rider react to it, and see what happens.
Yeah, the key in many respects in that championship fight has been Toprak really taking advantage of his best circuits, and the spell when the BMW was on best form with that run of consecutive hat-tricks, 4 rounds in a row unbeaten. Whereas Nicolo Bulaga had the 2 retirements in Assen, which was a weekend where he certainly would have won race 2, should have been on the podium in the Superpole race as well, and a couple of other big points losses in Superpole races later on in the season as well. So the gap of 39 could have been a lot less than that if it weren't for the Dutch round. As we continue on through this free practice one, let's just take you through the changes to the lineup, because unfortunately Danilo Petrucci is ruled out injured this weekend, and it's Nicola Spinelli who comes in to replace him. Now, we'll all fondly remember Spinelli's last appearance for Barni Ducati. He was a race winner, so maybe because Barni haven't had a race victory this season so far, they've decided that Spinelli's the man for the big occasion.
Yeah, but unfortunately for Spinelli, that win percentage probably going to drop now from 1 in 3 at the end of this weekend. But I think it's nice to be able to see Spinelli back in action for Barni. Obviously, you're not really expecting to see him up at the front of the field, but for Barni, obviously disappointment for them that at the end of their tenure with Danilo Petrucci, they're not able to fight for that third in the championship. Petrucci, he's deserved third in the championship this season because he's been so consistent. He hasn't put a foot wrong on the track. It's unfortunate for him that he has his training incident, but certainly you look at his performance this year, that's going to give Bautista a lot of hope going to Barni next year, that you are able to fight for top 3 in the championship.
Yeah, we'll come back to that a little later on. This is confirmation. Alessandro Del Bianco replacing Dominic Egerter. Saw Domi yesterday, his hand still in a brace and so on as he recovers from that injury, and unfortunately just not ready in time, and he's been declared unfit. again, real shame for Eggerter. What was supposed to be his final round in World SBK hasn't got a ride for 2026, and at a circuit where he had a double podium previously, of course.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to be on the Supersport grid next year. Looks like it's going to be on the Pichetti Kawasaki. That's what Speedweek.com are reporting. And typically Speedweek are always going to be pretty right on the German-speaking riders. So for Domi, if he's back on the Supersport grid next year, it'll give him a chance to challenge for race wins, challenge for a World Championship again. We never quite saw his best in World SBK, unfortunately. And when you look at Domi, there was always signs of his speed. You think about the front row start on his debut weekend in Phillip Island. You think about his podiums here. And it just never quite clicked into place from that point onwards, unfortunately, for him. And injuries were a big factor. Bad luck was a big factor. He had infections, he had lots of complications after surgeries, and he never was able to really show what he could do on a superbike.
Yes, just caught a glimpse there of Andrea Iannone and the announcement as to the replacement being Lorenzo Baldassari coming in to back to the Superbike grid for next season. It was no secret, it's been quite a while since we heard from Go 11 saying that they weren't going to continue with Iannone. Iannone still insists that he will find a way to be on the World SBK grid next season, so working on a new project for a new team. But for Baldassari, gets a second opportunity, second bite at the cherry in World SBK.
Yeah, obviously his previous time with GMT 94 team was a disaster, and it basically put his career on hold. And for Balda, he gets an opportunity to come on with the 2026 Ducati, in all likelihood going to be the best bike on the grid, a decent team with Go 11, and it's up to him to get results. But I think as well as that, the expectation for what you can see from Baldassari, don't be fooled by Phillip Island. He'll go well at Phillip Island. It's going to be a tough season for him, and it's been a tough year for Andrea Iannone, and I think that if Balda is able to match what Iannone has done this year, he's exceeded expectations by quite a margin.
And completing the field this weekend, Lukas Tulovic, and plenty of experience in the German Championship of late. There was a bit of a will he, won't he about his appearance this weekend, but in the end, good to see that he gets a place down pit lane, and therefore is able to take his place as a wildcard and complete a 25-rider field.
Yeah, nice to be able to see Tulovic out on the track here and making his World SBK debut, but when you look at what he's been able to do this season in the German Championship, to be able to pick up that title for the Triple M squad, it's nice to see Triple M here this weekend again. They raced in the class up until 2018, and it's good to be able to see them come here. Pirelli typically try and offer this as a reward to some of their national champions, and Tulo's out there on the factory test bike as well, so it's a top-tier Ducati, and it's up to him to get the results. Let's go back to the battle for third then. We were talking earlier on about a missed opportunity for Danilo Petrucci. Obviously, Alvaro Bautista, Jerez, a track he loves. He seemed to have the pace advantage, beat Locatelli in all three races for 3 podiums last time out in Estoril, and Bautista strings together 5 consecutive podiums just in time to take that third position. He said to me a couple of rounds ago, it's one he wants. You know, it is important to him to make sure he finishes third in the World Championship, and you know, a cynic will say, well, you'd assume that there's some bonus money available there for finishing on the World Championship podium. Fairness, Al. But you know, the reality of the situation is that's been his target all season long, because when the top 2 are out of your reach, the next best thing is to make sure you're on the podium as many times as possible and to claim the bronze medal. Yeah, exactly, and it is one of those situations where you've got to try and pick up the opportunities when they're there, and I think that for Bautista, that's probably doing the best he can do this year, is just to finish in third. It's not what you expect for a world champion, it's not what you expect for Alvaro Bautista, but ultimately it's one of those situations where you have to try and achieve what you can achieve, and he's effectively the number 2 rider at Ducati. If he finishes third in the championship, he's done better than most number 2 Ducati riders in the past. And the other point is, you mentioned previously that you felt Petrucci probably deserved that third in the World Championship. I think Bautista could quite easily make the same case, that he would deserve being third in the World Championship, given the sheer volume of podiums that he's had this season, much more than Petrucci. Both of those riders could easily make a case. Petrucci for saying, well, I'm the one who'd finished every race up until the injury that's cost him these final 2 rounds. Bautista will say he's had the pace advantage and he's been the man to get all of the podiums this season. Ultimately, you can't argue against Bautista being a well-deserving world number 3 either. I think that the mistakes are the biggest issue for me with Alvaro this year. The speed's there, as you'd expect for a double World SBK champion, but ultimately he's made too many errors. Now, he's come good at the end of the season. He's had trouble-free runs through the last couple of rounds, but it is one of those situations where the crash in Aragon was a good example of those mistakes that aren't really necessary for Alvaro. And they've creeped up all the way through the season, unfortunately for him. But it's about trying to have a clear run through this weekend. You're up against Locatelli to finish third in the championship. He should be able to beat Locatelli, and then it's mission accomplished by finishing third.
Free practice one with Nicolo Bulliger leading the way. Just quick look at the timesheets. Fastest, or lap record I should say, from 2024. The pole time from Bulliger was a 1:37.596. So we've got down to into the 1:38 in the early stages of this session for Bulliger, who leads the way 0.2 of a second ahead of Alex Lowe's. Sam Lowe's 0.3 of a second behind, and then the gap to Andrea Iannone at 0.6 of a second to P1. And Nicolo Bulliger it is who leads the way at present in FP1.
And you can see here for Van der Mark just heading down in towards turn 1, and for Michael Van der Mark, big weekend. You can see there the mistake he made up at turn 6. Easy to run in deep into turn 6 and to run through that gravel trap. But final race weekend as a World SBK rider for Van der Mark, and trying to make sure he's able to finish the season with some good results. It was confirmed yesterday by BMW that Van der Mark will be the test rider for BM next season, and he's going to have 6 days between now and the end of the year, he said. So that'll be the 2-day test this week, 2 days of Michelin running, and then another 2 days at the end of the season as well, when Petrucci and Miguel Oliveira will be on the bike as well. BMW taking a big step forward with their test team in recent years, but when you're able to have one of your current riders make that transition to be the test rider, it just pushes it forward even more.
Nicolo Bulliger going faster still there, as we saw, a 1:38.697. So half a second faster than anyone else has gone in this session so far. Of course, we're always a little bit blind as to what the riders are doing, what they're testing, until we get a little bit later on in the day and have the chance to speak to some of them. But Nicolo Bulliger setting the pace in the early moments of this free practice one, certainly hitting the ground running.
Yeah, doing exactly what he has down into the 38s. And when we look at the times that we had in last year's free practice sessions, across the 3 sessions, they were half a second slower than this. So right from the start of this session, Alex Lowe's on his second flying lap was within a 1/10 of a second or a few hundredths of a second of last year's pace. That gives an indication of just how quick the weekend's going to be, and the steps that are made year on year in World SBK. New tyres this weekend from Pirelli as usual. They've got some development tyres, and every year you just creep up that little bit more in the performance stakes.
Yes, as Toprak Razgatlioglu now sets the second fastest time, 1:39.067. Steve, how important do you think it is for Toprak to get that title over the line on the first day of racing in, in race 1 with good time to spare? 23 points over the course of a weekend. It's only once this season that he's failed to score 23 points, and that was an abject disaster in Phillip Island. So it's unlikely that he doesn't get the points. But the later you go into the weekend, the more nervous you start to feel. Yeah,
exactly. And it is one of those situations that you want it to be done as quickly as possible, because otherwise you're bringing into account mechanical issues. You're bringing into account another rider tripping up over you. Now, obviously, Toprak's comments after Estoril, they also give him the option of being able to use that as a little bit of fodder to any of his rivals if they do start to get in his way. But it's about trying to make sure that you achieve what you have to achieve this weekend as early as possible. Toprak's had his potential to win the championship up until now, but it wasn't really in his own hands. Now it is in his hands. He can go out and win race 1 and then the title secured, and that has to be the goal.
So Alex Lowe's and Sam Lowe's back into the pits, and a shorter first stint for them. Toprak Razgatlioglu looks as though he's peeling off as well. One thing we haven't talked about too much in this show so far, the Manufacturers World Championship. Now that is much closer than the Riders World Championship. And okay, Ducati have had plenty of them. They've already wrapped up the Teams World Championship for this season. It's much more meaningful for BMW probably than it is for Ducati, even because they've never had a Manufacturers World title before.
Yeah, and for BMW, they know that if they perform as they should do this weekend, they'll wrap up that Manufacturers Championship as well. But it does come down to who's able to get the best results this weekend, and I think that that's really exciting for a championship that doesn't get the attention that it probably warrants, because ultimately the world is dominated by the riders. They're the ones that are the focal point. But the Manufacturers Championship is the best result from your bike in each race. And obviously for Ducati and BMW, that's meant a lot of first and second place finishes this season. But it's meant that it's been really close between them over the course of the year. And I think that when you look back to the issues that Toprak had in Phillip Island and in Assen, that's been what's really brought that championship close together as well.
Yeah, the reason that Ducati have the advantage there is Toprak had the 2 non-scores on Sunday in Phillip Island. Michael van der Mark scored 2 points, so didn't really cover or back up for that non-scoring day for Toprak. Whereas for Nicolo Bulliger, his 4 non-scores, he's had Alvaro Bautista pick up points, he's had Sam Lowe's pick up points on a couple of occasions, and also Danilo Petrucci as the backup as well. So a few different scorers for Ducati. Obviously only 2 BMWs on the grid this season, so not as much strength in depth as it were to cover when you have that one bad day. But still, 2 wins for Toprak Razgatlioglu this weekend, and BMW would be odds-on favourites to go and take that Manufacturers World Championship.
Yeah, definitely, and that'll be their expectation coming into this one. And for Toprak leaving the team, he knows the importance of that. For BMW, he knows the importance of, as long as he wins his championship, chances are he's going to give them that opportunity to win the championship as well. And I think that there's a lot of motivation within BMW's garage to get both across the line. Yeah,
in a way, it might be quite fitting if Toprak wins race 1 and then sets us up for a head-to-head for the Manufacturers Championship on the second day, not least because, you know, Nicolo Bulliger had 2 wins on Sunday in Aragon, had a win in race 2 in Estoril last time out. The Riders' Championship looks like just a matter of course or a matter of time now for Toprak. So it might be quite nice actually to come back here on Sunday and focus on the head-to-head for the Manufacturers title.
Yeah, you can see here on the brakes down in towards turn 13, you can see how Toprak just modulates that brake lever as well on the way, and he's always special in those heavier braking zones, but whenever he's able to get the bike leaned over as well and trail into the corner, he's really able to find that little bit more than a lot of other riders in that area of the corner. And for Razgatlioglu, once again this weekend, he knows that it's going to be a case of 2 halves between where the Ducati is strong and where the BMW is able to work well, and it's going to set up nicely over the course of the weekend. But I think that for Razgatlioglu, it's going to be important this afternoon that he does what he normally does, which is have his longer run pace and try and do that race.
As far as Alex Lowe's is concerned, it's been a brilliant recent run, hasn't it? And really from Most onwards, that Bimota starting to find its feet. They did have the 6th place in race 2 in Assen, but from round 5 onwards, they've made a fair step forward, setting themselves up nicely for next season and a more regular assault on those front-running positions. For Lowe's, up in 6th in the championship now, obviously in the absence of Sam last time out, but it means only 9 points between them. I think they might have quite a lot of fun with that this weekend. Yeah,
a little bit of a battle between them now at this stage, and certainly when you look at what we've been able to see from Bimota, it has been really impressive, the steps that they've made through the course this year, how they've been able to develop that package. And it really is a brand new package. It might have the Kawasaki engine and some other internals, but when you look at how different the bike is, when you see how different they have to set the bike up, it really was a brand new project for them, and they've been a lot more competitive than I think people expected from them this year.
4 of the top 6 back in pit lane at the end of their first stints in free practice 1. First opportunity to head down to pit lane with our reporter Dave Goddard.
Experts, this could be the name title. Emotions. Okay, well, best of luck for the rest of the weekend. Thanks very much.
Apologies for that. As you could hear, some technical problems down in pit lane. We'll try to turn Robot Dave back into Human Dave later on in the session and see if we can get some word from the main protagonists of this very important weekend. A big weekend as well for Jonathan Rea in the context of his final weekend and what's been a season-long story really about Jonathan Rea. First, it was would he continue on the grid next season? Maybe different manufacturer, try and bring himself back to the front. Ultimately announced just before Manicourt his decision to retire from full-time racing, and a big press conference, well attended. It was a great emotional moment actually yesterday. A lot of his peers, a lot of the riders he's raced against, those that are still involved in the paddock, Chaz Davies, who've retired from racing, and the current racers as well, and a few of them giving their thoughts in that press conference too. So it's quite a nice moment to be a part of.
Yeah, Legends Row was behind me. As I think that it might have been self-dubbed by Camille, Eugene Laverty and Chaz Davis, but as ever, the 3 boys sitting together, and all of them had to pay their respects to Johnny, because it is one of those situations, like Chaz said, it's only when a rider retires that everyone actually tells you what they really think of you. And the respect that everyone had for Ray was very clear. Obviously, the last couple of years, we haven't really seen Johnny at his best. It's been perfectly clear for everyone. It just hasn't gelled with the Yamaha. But we've seen flashes of it in the second half of this year when he's been back close to his full fitness after all the injuries, when he's got a bit more feeling with the Yamaha, when it does what he needs the bike to do. He's looked like Johnny Ray, and he's able to make those aggressive moves on lap 1 and show why he was able to have all the success that he's had. Everyone's just hoping that this weekend he's able to make that tyre last and he's able to give himself the chance of one more podium.
Ultimately, it's taken him to the final third of his second season for him to be injury-free and for him to have started to adapt to the bike. And then you look at the last few rounds, and 4 or 5 times that he's been the top Yamaha in races, and you say, if this had been the case at the start of last year, we could be in a very different position now.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately Ray probably would have been led to the same decision, which is to stop being a full-time rider, because at Kawasaki he was ready to retire, and ultimately he ended up taking his money to buy his contract out because he needed a new challenge. He's gone to Yamaha, he's been able to see how things have gone, and he's decided to retire. I think he was always on a path to retire this weekend, one way or the other, but he obviously would have wanted to have it with a lot more success over the last 2 years.
And part of that is because there's one bike that is making the difference, and it's the Ducati, and if you're not on it, okay, Toprak can be the exception, and he's the only rider that can go with Ducatis ahead of the field, but the reality is if you're not on that Ducati, it's slim pickings at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the big thing for so many riders. When you look at BMW is a good example of it, because you've got Michael van der Mark there, Supersport world champion, multiple race winner with different manufacturers, a lot of success over the course of his 10 years as a superbike rider. You look at Garrett Gerloff, Scott Redding, plenty of other riders that have been on the BMW in recent years, and they haven't been able to achieve much with it either. Toprak is the difference maker because he's so unique and adaptable that he's able to make it work on the BMW, just like he could on the Yamaha, just like he could on the Kawasaki. But he's also the best superbike rider in the world, and that's what gives BMW their edge. Yamaha, they've got Jonathan Ray, but they've got Johnny at the end of his career, where it obviously is more difficult to be able to make that step when you need to find it. And for them, they've got a lot of other riders that I think that within Yamaha, they'd probably admit it as well. They've got those second-tier riders, really good riders that on their day can challenge at the front, can give themselves a chance to be able to really fight it out. But Locatelli, Gardner, into next year, whenever you put Javi Vierge and then a rookie like Manzi onto the bike, they're not the top-rack tier riders. They're not the Jonathan Ray in his prime tier riders. And ultimately, that's what makes it difficult then to be able to get the results. And I think that now we are in a very clear haves and have-not situation in World SBK. You either need to have top-rack or you need to have that Ducati. Otherwise, you're riding as hard as you can in the hope of top 5s and maybe some podiums.
And as for Jonathan Ray, clearly the story this weekend is, can he get himself onto a last podium? Can he add to the amazing records and statistics that he's had during his career? And can we just see that flash that you've talked about, that we've seen over the last few rounds, a couple of moments? And this is the Barney Ducati, Nicola Spinelli, making his way up to his feet. So that looks like a spill at turn 1 for Spinelli.
Yeah, and for Spinelli, obviously that's going to cost him a lot of track time. And we'll see what the damage is to the bike. Sometimes turn 1, it can be a case of you just hit the gravel and the bike just then falls, but it looks like Spinelli's had a bit of a roll there as well, so that might be a fair bit of damage done to his Barney Ducati and could well be the end of this session for him.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Proximity to the start-finish straight and the pit lane is okay, but the damage might be the thing that precludes further participation here. As far as Spinelli is concerned, and when you're a rider coming in from the cold at very late notice as well, that really is the last thing you need, is to lose time in free practice.
Yeah, and ultimately for Spinelli, obviously the expectations coming into this weekend and what he's able to achieve, it's always going to be pretty limited, but for him it's trying to make sure you're close to being the next Ducati on the grid, and I think that'll be his target. Going up against Tulovic is probably a nice little yardstick for him to judge him by, both of them being domestic championship riders.
Just a quick look at Nicolo Bulliga's pace. First thoughts, in and around the mid 1:38, fairly consistently there for Bulliga.
38s are good times on race tyres, especially in FP1, and you're going to be out there usually with the harder rear tyre in FP1, and then you'll use the softer tyre in the afternoon session, and that's whenever ultimately that's going to be a race tyre as well. And for the riders, if you're able to get yourself down into the 38 straight away, it's important. For Bulaga, half a second in hand over Toprak. It might well be where they're right there on a different tyre run, but at this stage, you'd imagine that it would be the hard tyre for both riders.
Just wanted to go back to Jonathan Rea. Obviously, yesterday wasn't the day to talk about his future, but there's still a lot of interest in what he does next, because there were rumours about possible wildcards or testing roles, and now it seems that endurance is being much talked about for Jonathan Rea. So, as I put it yesterday, a chapter closes this weekend, but there's also another chapter that opens immediately afterwards.
Yeah, and I think that for Johnny, I'd be surprised if he's not racing World Endurance next year. I'd be surprised if it's actually not with Yamaha. I think that putting him into EWC with the Bridgestone tyre is going to make sense for him. He's obviously had discussions with other manufacturers. Honda were quite keen for him to be their test rider. That's Brian Vickers has ultimately got that role, and he's going to have a couple of days testing this week as well. But I think that one of the big key things was Rea wants to be able to have the winter off. He didn't want to go to Phillip Island to do a wild card. That seemed to be a big thing within some of the manufacturers, to make sure that they're able to use the 2-day test in Phillip Island, and then you go straight to that opening round of the year. I think that for Rea, he'll do some testing. You'd imagine that Yamaha would still call on him a few times to be able to try and make some steps. You wouldn't be too surprised if he gets 4 or 5 days a year with them, and then the EWC duties, and I think that would be a good move for him at this stage. He has said that one of the big things is he's going to do some motocross racing, and he's going to do a lot of the Irish National Championship. And Johnny was a junior national champion in Ireland, and maybe he's trying to wrap up a senior championship as well.
Full circle. The only thing that was missing was the return to Honda at the end of his World SPK career, which I think would have been quite a story. But anyway,
I'll be honest, I might go to a motocross race back home if Johnny's on the line.
I'd still like to see wildcards in World SPK in the future, and I do wonder if any of that is on the cards, and what he might be thinking about that for the future, because we might be seeing the appearance record grow a little bit with a few wildcards in the future.
Yeah, I think that certainly for Rea, you wouldn't be surprised if there are some appearances still on the grid. He said that he doesn't want to be a full-time rider, and that's fair enough. Ultimately for Johnny, he's been a superbike rider since he was 18. You know, you think back to what he was able to do when he jumped onto a BSB bike. Johnny never won, as far as I know, he never won like a big championship until he won his world championship. He never won a British national championship, and then his first title success was his world championship. But he jumped on a superbike so early, and he was so fast. He had pole position in BSB in his 3rd round, I think it was. And you look at a rider achieving that. Can anyone imagine someone going in and doing that now as an 18-year-old? It wouldn't happen. And then within 2 years, you're on a World Superbike grid. It's almost unfathomable to see what Johnny was able to achieve early in his career.
The absolute greats do that, though, don't they? They have a way of getting to the top quite quickly in general. Think about Toprak Razgatlioglu, how quickly he was able to win on the Kawasaki, and 2019 famously against Jonathan Rea. They have a knack for getting to the top pretty fast, but it was good to hear Jonathan talk a lot about the hard work, about the the behind the scenes, the other people involved in delivering those successes. And as well, the part that having the opportunities in the sport give too.
Yeah, ultimately for Toprak, he was, I think, 22 whenever he jumped on a superbike first, or 21, and he had spent time on the stock 1000 bike, and being able to give yourself that opportunity allows you to develop your skills quite early. And these are the skills that he's developed as we ride on board up towards turn 4, and this is where the riders come through this corner. It's 100 miles an hour, and then you're always pushing out towards the exit curve, trying to give yourself more speed through there up towards the Cedo Ponds corner. This is where you try and make sure that the exit is key. You can see the riders take that double apex through that part of the track, head down towards the back straight. It's not really straight down here. You don't really get a chance to take a break anywhere around Jerez, because you're always moving the bike from one side to the other. You're into the heavy braking zone for 6. You can see for Toprak there just how late he is on the brakes, even in FP1. Just about gets that bike stopped into 6. In towards turn 7, this is where the track really builds into the final sector, where you've got turn 8, the fast left-hander. Through here, the riders hitting around about 130 k's an hour through the apex, down in towards the stadium section. Slow corners here, these two right-handers, but then the track really ramps up and builds the speed. This is where Toprak says he'd love to be on the Ducati in this part of the track. This is where the Ducati works really well, through the fast right-handers at the end of the lap, up towards turn 11. 100 miles an hour through the apex through there. Faster through turn 12. and then down in towards the heavy braking into turn 13, and you can see just how action-packed the lap is around here. The bike's never upright, and you can see for Toprak just how heavy he's able to brake while leaning in towards that final corner. So many races go down to the wire here in Jerez that you'd be very surprised if we don't have some across the classes this weekend.
That would be brilliant to have some head-to-heads, regardless of the championship, which, as we've said, from the Riders' Championship, really, it's about finishing 3 races in normal pace and normal circumstances for Toprak. But let's have another season finale like we did a year ago, where we had genuine scraps for top spot.
Yeah, and I think that there's no reason to expect anything other than that. I think that when you look at what we should have over the course of this weekend, should be close racing. If you think back a few years ago, Toprak against Bautista and the track limit situation in the final race of the year, it is one of those things where a lot of the time it comes down to the wire. And I think that for Razgadioglu, obviously different situation for him on the BMW. The BMW package for him is better than the package he had when he was on the Yamaha. It gives him the top speed, but more than anything else, when you talk to Toprak, it gives him the confidence on the brakes, and this is where he needs to have that confidence. It's actually when that rear tyre comes back into contact with the ground, is the bike progressive through there, and are you able to use your engine braking and the electronics really well? And that's usually what Toprak tries to dial in whenever he arrives into a new round as well. It's just trying to make sure that the electronic settings are where they need to be, and then they start to work on everything else.
Yes, Toprak Razgatlioglu. We've seen him often hit the ground running in free practice 1. What was it I said at the last round? 4 in a row that he'd been top in FP1. At the moment, he's a quarter of a second down on Nicolo Bulliger, as we see Nicolo Bulliger now making his way towards his Ducati. 15 minutes to go in this FP1. I think he'll be happy enough with the pace he showed in his first stint, and sets himself up nicely for the remainder of this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Just looking at a few riders out there trying to get a lot of laps in. Tulovic, as you'd expect, coming in for his debut this weekend. He's been able to put in 14 laps so far. Bobby Fong's here this weekend again for the Attack Performance squad, and he's out there making sure that he's able to get his laps in. He's done 17 laps up to this stage with 15 minutes left in the session. So some riders a little bit behind the curve in terms of their experience on these bikes at this track, trying to make sure that they're able to get their miles in.
Yes, and as for the top 2 in the championship, Nicolo Bulliger and Toprak Razgatlioglu both recording 13 laps apiece according to our counter. So no shortage of laps, and this Jerez circuit is one they all know well, because an awful lot of testing takes place here, and indeed after the round we'll already be starting to think about 2026.
Yeah, so a lot of the guys that came through the Superbike ranks know this really well from January testing and winter testing. If you came through the Grand Prix ranks, you know it really well from the Spanish Grand Prix, from Junior GP, and from basically your entire career. So everyone knows this place inside out. That's where a rider like Andrea Iannone, up there 5th in the standings right now. Iannone was strong here last year. This is a place where he's been able to win on a 125, and he's been able to win Moto2 races here as well. So he's got a lot of experience at Jerez, knows the track really well, but knows what you have to do around this place. And on these big Grand Prix style tracks, this is always where Iannone is at his best. He struggles on the scratchy Superbike tracks, but as we saw a couple of rounds ago in Aragon and Phillip Island in particular, tracks like this, they really do suit him because he's got the experience here, and this is where his skills were honed on these types of tracks, and this is where he always makes a step. That's where ultimately you look at Iannone's performance over the last 2 years. That's the reason why there's 4 or 5 circuits a year where he's been so strong, and other places where he's struggled.
A quick word on testing post-round as well, what that looks like in terms of participation and you know, the sort of start of the winter schedule, as it were.
One of the big things is going to be who goes where in terms of the crew chiefs for their moves for next year. Will they be able to be with their riders next year? What happens for the riders moving teams? You can see Ryan Vickers here on the Moto Corsa bike. We know that Ryan's not going to be on the Moto Corsa bike next season. Looks like that's going to be Alberto Sura. And for Ryan, he's going to be racing in BSB next year with Honda UK, but he's also going to be test riding for Honda a lot, and he's going to do 2 days this week already. So good for opportunity for him, and a really good opportunity for Honda, because Ryan Vickers will be a big step forward compared to what they've had from Nagashima and Tommy Bridewell, because Ryan's been pretty quick on the Ducati here this season. He's ridden well, he hasn't made that many mistakes in races, he's gotten to the flag an awful lot of the points through the season, so he's gained his experience and he's done a pretty solid job. And that means that for Honda for next year, they've got a rider that actually has a lot of Superbike experience, and that's a big thing for them, because Vickers doesn't come from the Grand Prix school. He doesn't come from Moto2 and MotoGP like Jake Dixon and Shamkat Chantra will. he's only been a Superbike rider. It's a long time since Dixon was a Superbike rider, so they need to follow what Vickers has to say in terms of the Pirelli tyres, in terms of the electronics, in terms of what the bike needs to feel like, and try and focus on that.
And BMW are going to start their pre-2026 very much on the back foot, because they don't get Miguel Oliveira until his contract and his season is complete in the MotoGP paddock, and now Danilo Petrucci is out injured as well.
Yeah, so they lose out on a couple of days with Petrucci, but the other side of that as well is they save those days. You've only got limited number of days to go testing in World SBK, so for BMW, the decision to test this week will be Van der Mark on the bike, and they'll just try and grind something out and figure it out. And then when Petrucci and Oliveira are able to get in the bike, that's going to be the end of November. There's a test here 26th and 27th of November. That's when they'll get their opportunity to ride, and that's where we'll be able to really see the first steps for where the likes of Petrucci are going to stack up. For Oliveira, obviously there's a big ramp up in his knowledge that he has to do. That's going to come during the January test in all likelihood, where we'll be here in the 21st, 22nd of January, then on to Portimao at the end of that week as well. Those 4 days are critical, because they're where you're really able to put the grind in for the year, get yourself ready, and then we'll go to Phillip Island. 2 days of testing. Phillip Island is so unique, you can't read anything into round one. When we come back to Europe, before the first round in Europe, there'll be another 2 days of testing. So there is a lot of track time that will be built up before we go to the European season next year.
We didn't really speak about Michael van der Mark earlier on in the programme, but the picture's a bit clearer about his future after BMW's press conference roundtable with the media yesterday.
Yeah, Chris Gonchor was saying that Mikey's going to be the test rider for BMW. It's a really good decision by BMW, because he's recent, he's relevant, and he's still fast. Finished 6th in the World Championship last year. This year's obviously been a tough season for him, but now they need to try and do something to keep making those steps forward. And ultimately, test riders are really critical, because the most important thing is, can you find performance? When you stop racing at this level, your performance does subside. If you become an endurance rider, within a few years, you are an endurance rider, and that's where it becomes really important to always still have riders that are right on that cutting edge and being able to find that performance potential. Van der Mark will be able to do that next year for BMW. That gives him a really important role going forward. And then BMW, you would expect, are going to make him their world endurance rider as well next season. Sylvain Gintoli says that he wants to keep racing, so you could easily have a situation where it's Gintoli, Van der Mark and Marcus Reiderberger, let's say, and that's a really strong lineup. And I think that for Van der Mark, he'd be excited to have that opportunity. He obviously said that he wants to go to Moto America as well. It looks like BMW think that the test program and World Endurance is probably a little bit more valuable for him rather than going to Moto America. But certainly for Van der Mark, it's all about making sure that he's got some role that allows him to have fun on the bike next year, because this year it's very clear to see just how difficult it's been for him, and that's not easy for any rider to deal with mentally.
You'd assume that if he wants Moto America or something like that in the future, the opportunity might well still be available to him. For Van der Mark, he's got experience in endurance. He's done really well in endurance, and actually, you know, that will give him some heart that he can have a good season next year.
Well, it's in the blood for him. With his dad, Henk was always a very good world endurance rider, and for Van der Mark, he's had a lot of fun whenever he's been in the endurance paddock. Obviously, the big one for him has been Suzuka over the years, but the chance to do some of the 24-hour races next year, that's something that's going to excite him as well. And for BMW, they're out there to try and win that World Championship as well, and they want to make sure that they're able to do things that they haven't been able to do in the past, and that's what makes the M1000 RR program exciting for BMW now, because obviously Top Rack won the Riders' Championship. This year they could win the Manufacturers' Championship. Next year the target will be making sure that you're able to win World Endurance and be competitive in World SBK. I think that they'll know, even with riders like Oliveira and Petrucci, two MotoGP Grand Prix winners, that it's not going to be easy for them next year. That's where the other programs become more and more important. And it was interesting when Gonchor was asked about the overall program, he mentioned the fact that when you look at what they've been able to achieve in different national championships, the bike is clearly very strong, winning the Spanish Championship, winning the French Championship, winning Moto America, and they'll want to make sure that going forward they're more competitive in those other national championships as well, like CIV or IDM or BSB, and then really able to show that the BMW is a really strong package for anyone to be able to ride.
Saw Jonathan Rea a couple of moments ago. 5 years since that sixth world title. Doesn't seem as long ago as that, but Jonathan Rea's sixth world crown, only rider to to reach 6. And one of the interesting topics of conversation yesterday was that 2021 season, and Jonathan put it that, you know, neither he nor Top Rack wanted to win in that 2021 campaign, but you could certainly make a case that Ray could have been 7 times world champion in his career.
Yeah, and for Johnny, I think when you look back to that 21 season, obviously for him it's a little bit of a missed opportunity. For Top Rack, it's the one that he mentions as being his favourite championship because the racing was so good. You had Scott Redding in the mix on the Ducati as well, and we had 3 different manufacturers up there, 3 very different riders, and we had it where Top Rack and Ray were just knocking spots off each other all the time, and really able to fight with each other all the way through that season. 22, another season where you're able to see what they were able to do up against Bautista for the first half of the year. And you know, these 2 riders, what we've seen from them over the years is they were constantly able to push each other to the next level. Obviously, Top Rack's been able to take that further in the last few years, but I think that if we had seen Ray on a different bike over the last few years, we would have seen a rider more comfortable with the demands of what he needs from a bike. The Yamaha, it never truly gelled for him, but we have at least been able to see in the last few rounds where he's looked more and more like the Ray of old and have that confidence back, and you just want to see it one more time where he's able to have that bit of a dice with the likes of Razgadioglu. But obviously over the season we're able to see that it's highly unlikely that we're going to see that this weekend, but you never know.
Lukas Tulovic, you saw there, he's just walking away from the gravel trap at turn 1, the bike being extricated as well. It's a shame, actually, because it's not been too bad a job in this free practice one. He's within two seconds of P1. He's, you know, ahead of half a dozen riders on the timesheets, and I think that's a fair expectation for what might be achievable. If he gets any points this weekend, he'll have done well. Yeah,
and I think that certainly for Tulo, that'll be the target, but it's tough to break into the top 15. And I think that if we compare Tulovic's performances, we've got Spinelli to compare him to, we've also got Bobby Fong to compare him to over the course of the weekend. Looks like Tulovic, knowing the Pirelli tyres, knowing the track, knowing the team, he should be able to outperform both of those riders. He's been able to do that up to this point so far, and he's doing well. He's within 2 seconds of the fastest time in this session, which I think is pretty much what you could use as a legit target for him. And I think that between him and Del Bianco as well, we've got another rider in the mix that gives all of those riders someone to fight for. And I think that for Tulovic, Del Bianco's a good target. We know that the Yamaha's going to work well around here, and both riders have pretty similar experience level. Yeah, as you say, that's the sort of direct opposition. Then the stretch target is, can you get anywhere near the likes of Gerloff, Vickers, Van der Mark, that sort of group that are generally in the points just outside of the top 10, Taz McKenzie as well. You know, that's sort of the next, can we latch onto those? Can we go with those in races? And I think that that's legit, because we'll be looking further up the field for the likes of Jari Montala here this weekend, because this is the type of track that suits Montala. Montala's had a real up and down season. There's been some flashes of real potential, but there's been too many crashes, and that's where it becomes important on a weekend like this for him to be able to show something, to be able to come away with top 10s and try and score those good points like he had earlier in the season. Yeah, I think he'll want to do that before we head into the winter, because the last 3 rounds have been horrible, I think is about the best I can say. Just a single point in Estoril last time out. 1 12th place finish, his only points in Aragon. No score in Magny-Cours. Even, you know, earlier in the season, he'd had all of the retirements, but he'd also had the top 10 finishes, and that's not been the case at these last 3 rounds. Yeah, and I think when you look at the performance really from even Taz McKenzie jumping onto the Ducati, he's had, I think, 5-point scoring finishes since he jumped onto the MGM bike when Scott Redding left it. And it means that for Jari Montala, I think it's been such an up and down season, and World SBK is so competitive now that it is very difficult. But the crashes have added up, and he hit the ground running at the start of the season, but he was also at the 2 tracks, Portimao and Phillip Island, where he was so good on a super sport bike. He has so much experience around there that it was always going to be those tracks on the Ducati that it was going to suit him. Since then, we've just seen it where he's fallen further and further down the field, and ultimately, if you're on a good Ducati package, Barney's a very good team, and you're 18th in the championship, it is a disappointing season. But as we see here from Sam Lowe's making his way around the number 14 bike, his season last year was disappointing. His second season, he made a big step forward. Montala, that's what he needs to use as his target for next year. Yeah, and obviously it's not a wrong decision from Barney to have
renewed him because Most was good, Misano was good, Balaton Park was good. It's just that since then he's had 3 horrible rounds. If they were making the decision now, who knows whether it'd be the same one. But earlier in the season, you'd say, well, look, those 8th place finishes, those other top 10 finishes, that's enough to justify giving him a second season. So he's got to get back to that at very least, you know, and head into the winter with a little bit of confidence.
Yeah, and I think that that's the big thing for all these riders, is just to find that confidence going into the winter. And the final round is always a tricky one because everyone's trying to basically build into Phillip Island already, because the season comes upon us so fast. It's the 3rd week of February that we'll be back racing. So immediately after this week, we go into testing. We've got another test in a few weeks' time here in Herat. Then January is all about testing. The bikes get shipped out to Phillip Island, and you're straight into round 1. So it means that ultimately the decisions that are made this week at the test will have a big impact all the way through to your performance right to the start of the season. So for a lot of teams and riders, that basically means that the final rounds of the year, you're almost getting ready for next season to try and make your next step forward.
Just wanted to make a quick note on those times through the speed trap, because I thought they were interesting. The Ducati's first and second, Bulliger and Bautista, both 282 kph through the speed trap. But it was interesting to see Bassani up there in the top 6, a Honda, a BMW. We know the engines work well there, but most notably that, you know, the Bimotor wasn't far behind, and this circuit in particular, that there are opportunities for them this weekend. Yeah,
this isn't the power circuit. This is the circuit where you drive out of turn 5 and you carry the speed down the hill, and it's only usually a 5th gear circuit, and for a lot of riders that means that it's not about the outright power you have, it's about how you're able to drive out to those corners. Obviously you need power on the exit of some of the slower corners, but this is a place where you are able to mask some of your top speed difference, which obviously will help the motor quite a bit.
Checkered flag is about to fall. We've got less than 1/10 of a second between our top 2, Nicolo Bulliger and Toprak Razgatlioglu, and that should stay that way at the end of FP1. Next best is Xavi Vierke. We're riding on board with Jonathan Rea, his final weekend as a series regular in World SBK. 8th position for him in this FP1. No big incidents, no major surprises in this session this morning, you'd have to say, and honours relatively even between Bulliger and Razgatlioglu.
Yeah, and for Bulliger, obviously able to have that fast time early in the session. We'll see what everyone does when they go out there with their softer tyres this afternoon, and that'll be what will really show us where everyone's pace is at. But Bulliger does what he has to do at the start of this session. Nice to be able to see Xavi Vierge up there as well, 3 different manufacturers inside the top 3. And we know that the Honda should work pretty well around here, and certainly for the likes of Xavi, it's a track he knows very well. So hopefully for him, he's able to build on what he did last time out as well in Estoril, where he had a really strong weekend, was up there running inside the top 8 all the way through.
As Garrett Gerloff comes through to take the checkered flag, he climbs to 11th position with his final lap. So that gives us Nicolo Bulliger, Toprak Razgatlioglu, Xavi Vierke, your top 3, Iannone, Sam Lowes, Alex Lowes, Jari Montella, Jonathan Rea, Alvaro Bautista, 9th place and over a second behind Nicolo Bulliger, and Andrea Locatelli rounding out your top 10. Familiar tale, isn't it, for Bautista? It must be incredibly frustrating. Seen times at the last couple of rounds where, you know, the gap's 9/10 of a second behind the top 2. It's absolutely ridiculous. And part of that is, you know, the reason that we then are in a position where 39 points looks close but looks very far away in the championship, because nobody can go with that top 2.
Yeah, and ultimately that's been the difference between them. And if you're to win the championship, you need other Ducatis to be in the mix, and they just haven't been this season. Bulliger and Toprak have just got that margin over everyone else.
And when they were, they got told off. Andrea Iannone and Toprak Razgatlioglu. Still further comments coming out at the end of the day yesterday from the pair of them.
I would say, though, like the most aggressive moves we saw in Estoril were from Toprak.
On Locatelli, that was bold, wasn't it, into turn 9.
But a lot of it comes down to the fact that if you make these statements, it's almost as if it's, you know, to preempt something. A lot of times riders do this, where you're playing those mental games because you want to make sure that other riders know that you're aware of what the situation is, and you're trying to almost make sure that they second guess themselves and stay out of the battle.
But do you also risk winding up Iannone and Locatelli completely unnecessarily, because both of them clearly like Toprak?
Yeah, it's a really strange situation for Toprak. I was surprised when he made such a big deal about it, because none of us really saw anything that was too untoward. And I think for Toprak, that's also a little bit of an indication maybe of the pressure that he's feeling as well at this moment. And obviously for Razgatlioglu, he's trying to make sure he's able to get across the line for the championship. But we'll wait and see what happens when we get underway for race 1.
So, confirmation of your results in free practice 1. Nicolo Bulliger and Toprak Razgatlioglu separated by less than 1/10 of a second. Let's hope we see that continue to be the case for the remainder of this weekend. Then it's the Honda of Xavi Vierge, and the next Ducati is Andrea Iannone P4. Big gap to Alvaro Bautista, over a second to P1, down in 9th place. And top Yamaha rider is Jonathan Ray, a couple of places ahead of Andrea Locatelli. So he starts the weekend as he means to go on. Michael van der Mark will down the order. He'll be disappointed about that. Ground for him to find later on. And interesting balance of power between the substitute riders and wildcards towards the back of the field. There's the long run. We saw the pace on your screen earlier on from Nicolo Bulliger. 1 minute 38.587, the fastest of the times, but plenty of laps in the 1 minute 38s there. Not so much from Toprak. We saw shorter stints from him. You'd assume he's just trying to find something and some comfort on the bike, but his last stint there, 138.675. And then Xavi Vierge, low 1 minute 39 for his fastest lap, but most of the times there in the late 1 minute 39s or in the early 1 minute 40s. Sector times, 3 of them taken by Nicolo Bulliger. The first 3, less than 1/10 ahead of Toprak Razgatlioglu and Xavi Vierge in Sector 1. .3 seconds in Sector 2, 1/10 up on Toprak Razgatlioglu through there, and look at what a short sector it is as well. That looks like an opportunity for the Ducati. Sector 3, only a fraction ahead of Razgatlioglu through there. And the fastest man in Sector 4 is Andrea Iannone, 30.1, but Nicolo Bulliger is second fastest, so not far away at all from the ideal lap for Nicolo Bulliger. Well, that's all for now. We'll be back in 3.5 hours' time to do it all over again with FP2. Goodbye for now.